What's that? We're Oh, hello listeners and welcome back to Roswell Underground. Mr. Gray here, just loosening up the vocal cords before we got started. Before I embark on any kind of activity, I always find it's good to limber up a little bit. Something Mr. Covington might want to think about considering what he's about to get himself into. Frankly, if I were the man, I would have taken homelessness. But I guess some people just have a standard of living they just can't let go. I peered back through the window. Several men stood around the puddle that had moments ago been a fellow goon. They glared and gestured at the butcher. Despite their obvious anger, I could tell from the way they stood that they weren't going to risk a mutiny. At least not yet. It was a small comfort to know that Gavin was on thin ice. Smaller comfort when I considered the vaporizer in his hand. That night, I decided caution was the better part of valor. I climbed back down from the roof and headed back to my office, wondering what exactly I'd gotten myself into. The humid summer air didn't stink half as much as this job. Times being what they were, my office and apartment had become the same place. As I drifted off to sleep on a blanket spread out on the floor, I had the strangest dream. Mr. Covington, I hope you don't think you're going to just walk away from this. The voice was hers, but the eyes staring at me weren't. They were huge and solid black with a vertical yellow line running down the middle. I tried to see more of her, but it seemed eyes and voice was all she consisted of. Not at all, I said. I plan on running. The eyes continued staring at me in silence. The way I see it, you left out some important details. I think that leaves me free to do as I please. You have seen what you are to retrieve and what it can do. Do you really want to leave it in the butcher's hands? I let that sink in for a moment. I know what you are thinking. You're likely dead either way. Would you rather die fighting or as a coward? The lady had a point. I'd rather not die at all, I said. Then you know what must be done. The eyes vanished, and I stared into darkness for several seconds before the faint twinkle of stars came into view. I felt my body begin to drift, and I floated out beyond the planets and galaxies in time. I saw worlds born and end, and universes collide. And then the phone rang. Instinctively, I rose and stumbled over to my desk to answer the call. It was only when I put the receiver to my ear that I remembered my service had been turned off a month ago. Hanging up, I blinked several times and tried to convince myself that I had dreamt the sound. Sunlight seeped in around the blinds. The couch beckoned me back to catch a few more winks, but the stiffness in my neck made a stronger argument for staying awake. Besides, after the dream, I wanted to get this job done and over with. Now, I'm not one for giving up trade secrets, so pardon me for sticking to the magician's code a bit here. All you need to know is that I managed to get my hands on some work clothes and a refrigerated delivery truck. The perfect disguise for strolling right through the front door of Gavin's operation. I hadn't quite worked out what I was going to do once I was in, but that could wait. I tend to work better under pressure. Despite the truck having air conditioning, sweat poured down my face like a shower. My nerves threatened to unravel like a cheap sweater. The closer I got to the meatpacking plant, the more I wanted to run away faster than a groundhog spotting its shadow. It took me a long moment to climb down out of the cab after I pulled up to the loading dock. No workers or gang members posing as workers were visible. Even the normal spot across the street lacked the usual lookout. Gavin must have felt extremely safe with the device in his possession. 3 deep breaths and I walked over to the bay door and pounded on it. I could hear angry, loud music on the other side and pounded again. Harder this time. The music stopped. 1, 2, 2, 3. I began silently counting. A lock thunked and squealed, and the door exploded upward. My skeleton tried to shoot out of its fleshy prison. Gavin the Butcher, wild-eyed and hulking, stood mere inches in front of me. His hair was oily and slick, and a rank smell similar to a barge on a hot August day wafted from his mouth. The warehouse behind him was dimly lit, but I could make out several dark red puddles scattered around the floor. Apparently, things had gotten a little out of hand after I left the night before. "What do you want?" My mind raced, trying to remember my story. I hadn't counted on Gavin being his own doorman, and whatever words I had ready on my tongue fell out in stammered syllables. "You know what's good for you. You'll answer." "Here to pick up an order," I finally managed. Gavin spit at my feet and stood up straighter. "It's Thursday. We don't have any pickups on Thursdays." I glanced down and pretended to read something off my clipboard. "Well, this is the Pack-It-In meatpacking plant, isn't it?" I began looking around like I was trying to find a sign. Yes. But we don't do Thursdays. Now, bugger off before you regret it." A flash at his hip caught my eye. Hanging from a belt loop was the great MacGuffin. It was now or never. "Well, shucks. You're right. Looks like I misread my paper. I'm sorry about this." "Hey, what's that?" I said, pointing at the metallic shape at his side. It would have been easy to mistake it for a TV remote if it had more than one button. He smacked my hand away. "That's close enough. Now leave." Glaring at me, he lifted his arms to grab the rope hanging from the bottom of the door. I shook my head before diving at his waist. For a nanosecond, I swear I felt cold metal before a fist crashed down on my spine, sending me face first into the concrete. Right. Look with my eyes, not my hands. Though my body was bruised and battered, my sense of snark remained intact. It's a blessing and a curse. A large steel-toed boot crashed into my ribs. That shut me up. Air burst from my lungs, and I tried to move out of the way of a follow-up blow. Rolling onto my back, I looked up just in time to see a Sasquatch-sized foot rushing down at my face. Every muscle in my body tensed, and my eyes closed. This is how I would die, my head curb-stomped to China. Something like a watermelon splitting open filled my ears, and the scent of Gavin's rancid breath washed over me. "You can get up, Mr. Covington." My eyes shot open. "You." She wasn't looking at me. Kneeling beside Gav, lead pipe in one hand, she removed the device from his belt loop, inspected it for a moment, and in a blinding flash, the butcher was no more. "Jesus! You can't just kill people like that!" I shot back to my feet and instantly regretted it. Something stabbed in my side, and I realized I likely had a broken rib or two. "He did," she said, and she wasn't wrong. "Okay. So maybe it's not such a bad thing here," I said. "A world without Gavin the Butcher would definitely be a better place." "What are you doing here anyway? And why did I have to get my ass kicked if you were able to just take the thing back? And who the hell are you?" The questions tumbled out like rocks rolling down a hillside. She sauntered closer to me and laughed. I could smell her hair, and it was intoxicating. My anger almost subsided instantly. "I told you I would be watching, Mr. Covington. You had him distracted, and I made a move. Be thankful. If not for me, that would be your head." She glanced at the gooey puddle that had once been the city's most despicable criminal. "If not for you, I wouldn't have been here at all." She put a finger to my lips and looked me in the eye. For a moment, her baby blues morphed to solid black for several seconds before returning to their regular, captivating hue. My breathing became shallow. Images of her kissing me, of my hands running along her body, filled my mind. Call it a hunch, but I'm getting the impression that you're not from around here. She arched a single eyebrow and flashed a coy grin. It is over, Mr. Covington. Do not worry about the past. Now, come with me. You look like you could use a drink, she said, wrapping her arm around mine. I wanted to ask more questions, but sometimes you've got to know when to shut up. And when a gorgeous, deadly dame with a death ray in her hand tells you it's time to move on, you listen. Besides, ignorance is bliss, right? You're speaking my language, Miss... Just call me Miss Luck. She winked at me and grinned. Luck. She's fickle and unpredictable. I may not have been back in her good graces, but I had something close by my side helping me back into the delivery truck and to a night of whiskey-washed dreams. I think this week's episode has taught us a very important lesson, listeners. What's that, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. Never, under any circumstances, remove your tinfoil hats. I don't care if you're asleep, or in the shower, or at the supermarket. The second you take those hats off is the second that the aliens are going to enter your brain. And when they do that, it's all over. Don't ever say I never told you anything. And on that note, that's all the time we have for this week's episode. So be sure to tune in next time. See you then.